G'day, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Unprofessionals podcast number 3. And today we're doing a little bit of a collaboration. We have a special guest, Crash Laobi, who I'm sure some of you are very much familiar with. If you'd like to introduce yourself, man.
Hello, I'm Laobi. I make ship posts on YouTube, and I'm big into flight sims.
All right. Yeah, that's about as short as I was expecting. If you haven't checked them out, I'm sure Demi's going to pop the channel up in here. Some of the funniest friggin' DCS content that I've come across. It is great. So, we have sort of a continuation of the last podcast here today. We were chatting around with Shamrock from the Stormbirds, and one of the sort of points we rolled over in amongst our chat was exactly what do we do? How do we encourage more people to join the flight sim community? Exactly what can we do? Because this is an interesting spot for me and Laobi because, as both content creators, whether or not we intended to be or not, we have sort of become part of the advertising for the flight simulator communities that we're linked into. When people do a search on Google for DCS World, depending on what they search, they may get a video that's actually from Eagle Dynamics. But more than likely, they're going to get a video that is from myself, Laobi, Red Kite, or any one of a number of fantastic content creators that are out there. They're going to get us before they actually get any official content. So, what can be done on our end? Is there anything we can do to expand? Is there anything the rest of the community outside of us can do? Things like the Hoggit or other sort of community hubs, the number of Facebook groups that exist for DCS. And of course, what can Eagle Dynamics themselves do to try and make bringing people into this community a bit more of a thing? Because growing DCS, I think, is going to fix more problems than trying to fix some of the problems more directly would be. Anyways, so that's
Well,
going to be the chat for today.
yeah. Well,
Just tell me.
I'll start because from my standpoint, I'm doing what I can. I'm not a well-known content creator, although I am famous. Because is Dead Meat famous yet? Of course I fucking am. Um, that's a very 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 old joke. Going back to when I actually still played War Thunder. But what I
Don't hold it
do,
against us.
yeah, what I do for DCS and IL2 is I run servers. I have servers that are designed to be as noob friendly as possible while not sacrificing too much of the realism that comes in with flight sims. So that I much to Mag's annoyance with the IL2 server, although it's sort of a necessary thing. I don't have markers on. I have realistic things, but the engine warmed up is on and I also have mouse control enabled, so those people that don't have a joystick can still fly in multiplayer on my server, which is something that was only noticed it starting to happen after I had my server up for a while with the mouse enabled thing, that a lot of people did not have the virtual joystick enabled on their servers. They'd actually had it disabled so you couldn't use it, which I found very, very annoying.
Absolutely.
It's just like, why would you limit it? Why would you be an elitist dickwit? So yeah,
Unfortunately, that's a part of the community that that does pop up a lot, and that's a lot of it. I know on my end, Ash, I probably should let you jump in first, though,
yes,
before I
you
jump
should.
into this. Yeah, actually, you should go. Yeah, sure. I'll let you go
Sure.
first. I've talked too much already.
Oh, thank you. You're a true gentleman.
I have your famous Venn diagram to describe this. It is up on stream now.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think one of the big barriers to entry is obviously hardware. You need, a PC that wouldn't look out of place at NASA to run the fucking thing in the first place.
Mm.
So I think the the more the community can reach out to people, because basically, I mean, we were before the podcast began, we were talking about weeaboos. Well, you know, from an outsider perspective, and I always try to look at things from the perspective of an outsider. Flight simming kind of it's on that bell curve with weeaboos in a lot of ways. You know, it's something that strange middle-aged men generally do when nobody's looking. So it's you need young blood in the community. You need fresh blood.
Yes.
I also think one of the other major problems is there are not enough ladies taking part in flight simming.
Mm,
And I'm not beating the, you know, oh, we need, you know, gender equality drum or anything like that. Far be it from me. But I think when you've got a community where there are nearly no women, men become fucking strange. You know, it's that effect of, you know, when you walk into a bar and it's just men and it's not a gay
mm,
bar, it's, you know, it's a sword fight. And men
mm.
in an environment like that just they become unbearable, basically.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that, and it's just something I've got a couple I can work on this end. I've got my daughter, and I've been trying to get my daughter to fly. She's not interested. I've been trying to get the wife to fly. She only likes watching me fly, but that is a step in the right direction at this point. At least I've got her down to having a favorite aircraft, which they still got to put into fucking DCS.
The minute they put
I,
that
I want
that into
I want
DCS,
my
that's
F111 in, or more to the point, my wife wants her F111 in, and she's starting to get pissed at the fact that I don't fly it. So um, that would help. Um, yeah, getting more women in is definitely something that would be great, or getting more of anybody in.
Yeah.
And you're right about that. That the stigma of middle-aged men. Although, to be fair, I've been actually trying to use that as well. We actually did this recently down in PAX when we were talking to Nvidia, and I've been trying to use it to talking to a few others. If you remember back, probably late '90s, sort of before the FPS genre really launched off. Um, Flight simming used to be used as a showcase from PC developers or hardware developers to show off their new gear and to show off, because it was sort of the most demanding thing around. Simulating an aircraft in combat was the hardest thing to do. Microsoft used to use Flight Sim as their bit of their showcase, and there were a whole bunch of games. There was about a Flight Sim released about once every 12 months, or multiples depending on what year. That all sort of died around the birth of the FPS genre and everything going over keyboard and mouse, shoot 'em up bullshit, which is, well, I say bullshit, but it's all fun. But the thing is that overall, if you actually look, well, as you mentioned, talking about hardware requirements, flight sims today are still, you know, if you can run DCS on high settings, you can run anything that the AAA community is actually producing. So what I've been
Yeah.
trying to do is show these hardware developers, because most have forgotten the fact that flight simming even exists. They have no idea that it's still there. Showing them things like DCS and saying, look, you should be using these in your showcases for your games, because these damn near photorealistic flight simulators, and you can do some amazing stuff, as you can see with some of the Eagle Dynamics done, the videos, advertisements that they do, the little cinematics that they do. You can make some stunning video.
I
You
prefer
should be
heat
using this.
blurs.
Well, heat blurs as well, but you know, any of the really well done ones, you know, the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Use these to showcase your new hardware, because you get a whole bunch of people outside of the aviation space that are looking at this new hardware, even though they don't need, like, nobody needs an RTX card to run Fortnite.
You shut your
Yet
goddamn
people,
whore mouth.
but people are buying 2080 Ti's to play friggin' Fortnite. So when you're doing a showcase for a 2080 Ti, put some, you know, put some IL2 in there, put some DCS in there, put some really good cinematic stuff in there, broken into the mix. And you might have a few people go, "Oh, is that the new Ace Combat?" No, that's not the new Ace Combat. That is this game, which is available right now, and we'll start potentially bringing some people through. And it's hard because, yeah, there's also the side talking to looking for advertisements for different things, because obviously YouTube these days, you've got to ask, you've got to try and find some.
Yeah.
Talking to them about and explaining to them, this is what flight simming is, and trying to explain to them the people that are playing IL2 and DCS right now that you're not advertising to, you're not acknowledging even exists, are early 20s through to probably 60s. Generally, people that are pretty switched on with their money and are willing to buy extremely high end systems in order to run their games or their flight sims at really high detail levels.
I have no idea
They're
what you're on
people with
about.
massive. Yeah. Dead Meat, here's a perfect example. He's already got what? You already got one VR. You're looking at buying another. Yeah, let's not go into your hardware thing, but you're spending excessive amounts on hardware, and nobody's advertising to them. And because nobody's advertising to them, as though a lot of people complain about advertisements, but because they're not advertising to them, they're also not advertising in an attachment to anyone outside of the community. Like advertisement tends to funnel people in on
Yeah.
from the outside, and because there's nothing happening at all on that side, nobody's being directed into this community at all. Most don't even know it's here.
That's very
So
true.
mm,
I think one of the other issues with advertising is they tend to pick on a generation that, I mean, even if you watch advertising on YouTube, it's generally directed. Gaming advertising is
mm,
generally directed towards the pester power audience. So it's
mm,
people that don't like, it's kids basically, and they don't
yeah,
really have disposable income. Yet that's where most of the advertising is pushed, and they're kind of forgetting about, as you said, the young people in their 20s, in their
mm,
30s, in their 40s, the ones who have kind of got rid of their kids and now have disposable income again.
mm.
I can't get rid of my
That's
Yeah.
all
kid. It's
ignored.
illegal.
Yeah, it's an area that I think is being missed. I mean, VR is a big one. When was the last time you saw VR advertised, like advertising for a VR device, deliberately focusing on flight sims?
Never.
I can't recall.
I
They might have a little here. Mostly it's this space game which is arcadey, or
Yeah.
what's that, the one with the
Beat Saber.
lightsabers where you
Beat
cut,
Saber.
Beat
yeah,
Saber.
Beat Saber, which I actually think looks absolutely fantastic. But they're doing Beat Saber, or they're doing some VR first person shooter, or some VR Skyrim, because we haven't seen 62 versions of Skyrim already, and we already need another version of it in VR as well. We're seeing all of this. VR is almost perfect designed for flight simulation. Nobody
Yeah.
uses flight simulations in the advertising for it. Yet I have never had any kind of operation with VR or usage of VR that was better than the experiences in DCS VR. The first time I used it, my first VR. I don't have a functional one at the moment. Both my headsets are broke. But my first headset was the Oculus DK2, the prototype test type that was sent out for the before the CV1 came out, and flying the F-15 across Nevada and then just snapping the stick to the right and pulling back and just going into a dive. And I felt my guts just leave and just like express elevator going down. The whole body reacted like what was happening was real, even though it wasn't.
I
And I didn't feel sick, but I felt that like I am going down now sensation. That
Yeah.
doesn't work anywhere else. That should be advertised, because the first time you do that in a flight sim, that sold me instantly on VR. I'm pulling my hair out at the moment that I don't have access to a functional one myself
as I said,
because of
we'll
that.
work it out.
I'm working. If cars stop crashing and shit in my house stops exploding, maybe I'll be able to afford one soon. Um, yeah, I've had a bad month. Anyways, that's one thing that's not being done. Talking about you see these large scale. You can play Fortnite on this wraparound curved ultra wide screen that's 2.5 meters wide. Yeah, that would look really good with an aircraft cockpit sitting in the middle of it, but nobody
Yeah.
puts an aircraft cockpit there. And it goes on and on. Thrustmaster's got a fairly decent idea about how to run the advertising, but they sort of deal in the simulation spaces and they work with the
Yeah.
steering wheels and work with their stuff. Although even they don't sort of push it out enough. They're pushing a niche by sort of being in a niche, but at least they seem to have some idea on how to make this work. But there's so many large hardware developers that could be pushing their products and advertising their products into the space where the people within the space would probably, well, some would at least appreciate having access to the stuff. And in the process of doing this, those that are outside watching the advertisements because they're interested in that new monitor potentially for playing Fortnite on a 40-foot screen for some reason, would end up seeing a flight sim. And maybe they'll go, oh, hang on, this is free to download. Maybe we'll take a look. Maybe we'll just have a peek and see what happens. Or there's a sale on Steam. Maybe I'll pick up IL2. I've heard of this P51 before. We can have a look at this and see what it's all about. Not all of them will stay.
Yeah.
But maybe some will.
One of the, going back to the VR thing, staying on the VR thing, one of the things that I, when I got VR and jumped in X-Plane 11, I took off from my local airfield and just flew over the area, and just the feeling of just knowing, having taken off from that airfield before in that model plane, the Cessna 172, it just, yeah, the ground detail on X-Plane and frame rate issues are not the greatest, but apart from those issues, just it just says, it just hit me right in the feels. I wish I wasn't poor and could still afford to get my license. Feeling that I had, just looking around, looking down. I'd previously tried that on a monitor and it just wasn't the same. It's VR just, it gives that extra level. And as you know, I use VR for everything, even on the occasions where I do actually finally crank up War Thunder.
Yeah, you got a madman who plays War Thunder Arcade in VR on a stick.
Wow.
On a stick. On a stick.
On a stick. Do you wear a monocle and a top hat while you do it as well?
No. But I actually have. It wasn't until several years in that I actually played War Thunder for the first time with a mouse and keyboard.
Wow.
Like I fired it up. I started off on a control pad, just an Xbox 360 controller. And I was playing that on a laptop when I was away from work. That was the first time I started playing War Thunder, and then when I got home, I went and got myself just a cheapy Logitech 3D Wingman, and then I realized that I used to have one of those, except I used to have the force feedback one many years ago, and it just
the one that came with Flight Simulator 10, I think there was some offer at the time.
At the time I just got the stick alone. There was nothing with it, but I've distinctly remember having it and being fantastic. I was actually playing, what was it called? Warbirds, I think it was, or it was like they had a World War One version called Dawn of Aces. I remember that.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was like the first sort of mass multiplayer online sort of. Yeah, so it was called Warbirds, is the one that I played. And me and a mate would sit, because it had a local network option. It just it worked. It was early on, we couldn't play anything else. Mainly just because there just wasn't anything else available at the time that had network multiplayer for flight sims. We were playing that and just flying around, shooting down bots and whatnot. It was
actually this brings up a bit of a good good discussion point to go over to, because obviously it's not just about what those on the outside are doing, what the community is doing, and the rest, but what the developers are doing. And you mentioned here that one of those sims actually came with the flight stick, correct?
That's right. That was, I think it was FSX, but it may have been the one just before that, around 2004. And you got a free, I think it was actually a free Microsoft stick with force feedback.
you're thinking about the Microsoft Sidewinder.
Was that Sidewinder? Yeah, it was supposed to be Sidewinder.
Yes.
Funnily
See,
enough,
here's an
I've got one of
interesting
those
thing.
sitting right next to me.
Yeah, I should have kept mine just for a display piece. I ended up throwing it in the bin because it broke. The gimbal inside of it shattered. But considering how many flight sticks I've got around now, it would be nice to have in the collection. But anyways, what I was sort of getting at is that's one thing I have noticed with modern hardware. Now, like no complaints. Some of the new HoTaS we're getting now are absolutely amazing. I've actually got the WinWing one half hooked up at the moment. I've had to move some of it out of the way so I can do the podcast. But it is a prototype. It's had a few things that I've had a chat to WinWing about that I will cover when I do the review on it. That probably could be improved. But overall, it's pretty good, and it's F18 replica stick. And then you've also got Thrustmaster with their replica F18 stick for the Warthog. The hardware manufacturers that are sort of in the space are developing hardware for the Sims, which is good. No
Yeah.
complaints about that. But there's not much in the way of cross advertising there. So, you've sort of got to be into the sim before you go and buy that hardware, rather than there being sort of a package, as you just sort of mentioned then, where you'd buy a stick and it would come with the game, or what we could do in the modern one, part of the game.
Yeah.
Package deal with access to the F18 Hornet attached to the F18 flight stick.
Makes
So
total
somebody might
sense.
buy it. Actually start trying to get a link where it's not one way. At the moment, as you mentioned at the the hardware developers, the developers would package their game with the hardware. Now we're going the hardware developers are producing hardware specifically for a game. Because let's be honest, this WinWing stick is great. As much as I'm really enjoying it, it's designed for DCS. There's actually
Yes.
a few issues in regard to IL2 that I'm going to have to cover, configuration wise, that are a bit of a pain in the ass. But but DCS works perfectly. So it's designed specifically for DCS. The Thrustmaster F18 stick is designed specifically for DCS. The entire Thrustmaster Warthog specifically designed for DCS. Yet they're outside of having DCS approved on the side of the packaging. There's no link between the
Yeah.
stick and the game. We're in a odd space at the moment in terms of flight simulation and space simulation, where there's sort of been a bit of a resurgence in a couple of areas. I still think Star Citizen is part of the reason why, as much as people may not. Some people may not like Star Citizen, or don't think it's going to come out, or have negative feelings on it. I still think the sheer volume of space games that we've been seeing, many of them joystick controlled, have been because Star Citizen has sort of put space games back on the map, and a lot
Yeah.
of them people are buying joysticks and hardware specifically for space sims. Well, wouldn't it be great if flight sims actually had something that with these sticks that are actually designed for DCS, IL2, whatever,
Yeah.
happen to have a little piece of the game, a plane, access to a module, a download code for just to download a little something in there to download DCS.
Yeah.
Anything really. It doesn't really matter what it is. Maybe a CD with just a DCS base install, so somebody's only got to download the updates rather than having to download the entire goddamn client from scratch to save them time. Just something in there from the development side, so that if somebody goes and buys one of these sticks to go and play Star Citizen or whatever else, they've sort of got it sitting there in front of them now. They've got access to a flight sim right there. Why don't they install it on and see what happens?
I think particularly on the low end sticks,
Mm.
the what's it, the TM
T1600M.
1200 T1600M.
Yep.
If you gave somebody, even it doesn't have to be the latest aircraft. If you gave them, for example, a P51, or you gave maybe a code for a
FC3 F15.
yeah, anything at all. It would definitely help, particularly get kind of younger people or students who are obviously, on a budget. Because right now, for a student to really get into DCS, and that's kind of the demographic you're looking for. It's kind of particularly students getting into it. So there's constantly a turnover of new blood. And for them to afford DCS at the moment, it's they're going to have to be a pretty good rent boy if they're going to buy all the modules and all the gear.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
it's not.
down here in Aussie, look at Australian dollars, buddy.
Yeah.
F16 early access with its discount, $120 Australian. That's
Oh,
that's two
that
AAA
hurts.
games right there.
Yeah.
Just that's opening price just to get access to the early access, and that's with the early access discount. The F18's about the same price. This is part of the reason why I try and recommend to all new pilots. If you're going to buy any module, the first module you should buy for DCS is Flaming Cliffs, because the
Yeah.
amount of aircraft you get versus the cost, it's the most cost effective. It gives you a lot to do, and it gives you a lot of time for you to get comfortable with the sim and decide
Yeah.
whether or not you do want to buy something else, and to give you time to decide what to buy. Because that's another thing. You don't want to get somebody in, oh my god, this plane's going to be fantastic. I really want to fly it. I like it in real life. They drop 120 large on a plane and then go, I don't really like flying this. Well, bad fucking luck.
Yes.
That's what you've got now.
And
Um,
there is a lot of that in the community. I think there
mm,
are a lot of remorseful buyers.
mm.
uh, you
Yeah,
know,
that has happened more than once. I did buy the Hawk.
so did I.
Yeah.
Oh, that and worse than buying the Hawk.
Thankfully, I didn't pre-order the the P40.
No, me either. But worse than buying the Hawk, I actually encourage people to put down the pitchforks for a while, wait and see what happens here. And
Mm.
then the fucker's closed.
Mm, yeah,
Yes.
that was not good. But yeah, we need to actually. You mentioned the T1600M. That would be a perfect one, because the thing about space sims, and it's actually the way I fly dual stick on space sims, and a lot of people do. So I actually use two joysticks to control a spacecraft.
Yeah.
So the T1600M can be converted from right hand to left hand. So it's basically the go to entry stick for anybody who wants to fly twin stick in any kind of space simulation, because it can be both your left and right hand stick. So two of those in a pair have a random mix of aircraft just out of the FC3 pack. Maybe some MiG 29, some Su-27, some Su-33s, some F-15s, with maybe a code for access to their specific campaign out of Flaming Cliffs 3. You buy one of the sticks, you get one of the planes, it's got a campaign attached to it, maybe you'll go and play it. It would start to bring people over, and that should probably be extended out into the major Thrustmaster stuff as well, like the
Yeah.
the 18 Warthog stick and the F18 stick in particular.
Yeah.
This
Now,
go
In the
sorry, go.
meantime, Thrustmaster are now firing half their advertising department and sending us emails.
Wait, the thing is, we're doing your job for you here. I'm
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
you, just
We're brainstorming it.
yeah.
just a couple of points.
I'll take my check for the job to this address.
Yeah,
Actually, no, I've dealt with you before, Thrustmaster. You know my address, so just send the check direct in, okay?
a couple of
Yeah.
points from the chat there.
Yep.
There's Black Shoe Squid says that issue is FC3 does not in any way prepare you for full fidelity. I tell people to wait for the very frequent sales. I fully disagree with that. Just because you don't click with the mouse on the little switch doesn't make it any less preparing you for the full fidelity modules. Because
Yeah,
it's
that
still
comes
getting
down
you.
to
It's getting you used to the DCS environment for one.
yeah.
It's giving you access to all sorts of planes that you'll find interesting. I don't care who you are. There is at least one plane in the FC3 pack that you'll find interesting. It gets your head around some of the concepts, like actually using the radar and using targeting systems and whatnot.
And how to avoid getting a missile up your ass, because it doesn't really matter whether or not you're a full fidelity plane or not in a full fidelity plane. You kind of do the same thing in order to avoid, finding yourself with an AIM 9X anal probe.
Yeah. And
happening.
while you've got the the Su-25 and the TF-51D, well, TF-51D, I've flown it once, and because it's got no weapons, it's got no real place in in
Mm.
the scheme of things in DCS, other than it's cool.
Mm. Your opinion, Sophie?
And yes, I just quickly finish
Dead
up.
me.
The
Okay.
SU-25 is it's just, it doesn't excite people. Is
Mm.
its only problem I can think of. Over to you, Laobi.
I think it depends on the person. There are going to be a lot of people who will love the F3 as a first introduction, but I had been playing flight sims since probably late 80s as a child. Playing what was that one where you had to drop mail all over the US?
Oh, I do remember that.
Solar
Remember
Flight,
that
was
one?
it?
Solo flight. That's it. And the one thing that always really killed me, even with kind of later flight sims, was not being able to click a button. To have this kind of chart on your keyboard, or to have a chart in your mind with everything you had mapped. So
Mm.
that was the big attraction for me when when I started playing DCS, which was around
Mm.
2013, I think. When I first discovered it, it was like, oh my God, you can actually click the switch here. And, this was a kind of a big thing for me, being able to actually just click cockpits and being able to learn kind of systems in depth. Now, I am a strange fellow, so it's not everybody's cup of tea, but
Mm.
it definitely was like, because at the time the only other things that I could see out there were the likes of Ace Combat or
Mm.
Flight Simulator 10, which just didn't really do it for me. So I see the benefits in having the FC3 modules, but I also see that there are certain types of strange people who really enjoy clicky pits, and I happen to be one of them.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that, and this is actually it. Sort of actually addresses somebody else's comment in the thing at the moment about being a good entry level DCS, being a good entry level for somebody new to flight sims. I can completely understand wanting to click. I love the fact that I've got clicky options inside of all the full fidelity aircraft. I actually fairly rarely fly any of the Flaming Cliffs aircraft. The only ones I really fly tend to be the Redfall aircraft, and that's because I don't have a choice. I haven't got anything else, and I do happen to really love the MiG-29. I think it's sexy as hell. I love the fact that it blows like charcoal smoke out of the back of it whenever it starts, and it's great. But and there's no other option for me there. I'd love a clicky one, and that would end that for me. But I haven't got the choice. But
Yeah.
the big thing here I sort of want to bring up is I think it actually is, particularly with the FC3 aircraft, actually a pretty good entry level. And I think this is where the FC3 aircraft come in as your first planes. While having the clicky buttons is great, put yourself in the position of the new person coming into flight sims who hasn't come in before. At this
Of
point,
course.
they've probably come straight out of Ace Combat. So they're not going to be ready to flip switches inside of an aircraft. Maybe they will be. They're not everybody. As you said, not everybody is exactly the same. Some will be. I think it'd be fair to say that the vast majority won't be, and probably won't be overly experienced with a real combat flight sim.
Yeah.
FC3 gives you the simplistic control scheme, something is fairly easy to adapt into. And the good part is that all the controls basically interface, like they interchange between every aircraft. So the controls you have bound for
Yeah.
the F-15 basically work exactly the same in the MiG-29. So learning the planes is very quick. But the flight with the proper flight models that they've got now, the flight is accurate. So you've still got to learn to fly the plane, and it eases you into that. Do you really like the way this works? Exactly. You're not now flying Ace Combat. You're not going to be doing a 20G snap turn and firing off your unlimited Sidewinder missiles from under the
Yeah.
wings. You now have to conserve your ammunition. You've got to work your radar. You've got to use your communications to get in touch with AWACS to get direction to a target. You start getting access, you start learning all of these first. And then if you happen to be somebody who's very inclined to click, well, you're probably going to very quickly, if you like what you're feeling, going to transfer over to a full fidelity aircraft. And at that point, you've already probably, if you've jumped onto the multiplayer side, happened to fight somebody who owns the plane you might be interested in flying, and probably had your ass handed to you by them, which is only going to increase the point of sale. But again, at this point, you've got somebody in from the outside who wasn't playing DCS,
That's
and
true.
they're now playing DCS, and they're in, and they're ready to start making decisions. I really like this, but I'd really like it if I click that fucking switch on the dash rather than pressing this goddamn button because I always hit the wrong button, or
Yes.
whatever. They have that option, and so that's when they'll pick it up. But you've got to get them in the door, because in the end, you have to remember, most of us who play DCS, or really any flight sim, the idea of dropping $120 on an aircraft, yeah, it's fine. Like, we know what they're like. We
Yeah.
know the aircraft. We know how much it costs to develop them. We know how much effort goes into them. We know sort of what we're getting in the box, even if it's early access before it actually drops and it gets to us. Somebody who's
Yeah.
coming in from the outside doesn't know what he's getting for $120, and that is 2 AAA games. That is a big chunk of change for one plane. The argument that I see in my comment section all the time, or I used to until I sort of think I got most of my community to get their head around it, was, but I can buy a premium plane in War Thunder for $20.
But it's a completely different animal as well.
It
Well,
But it's,
absolutely is, but that's where their head was at. One plane for one plane, $20,
yeah,
$120, and that's where people from the outside are coming from.
yeah.
yeah, and
And it's
Mm,
very true. It seems preposterous to
there's
throw $120
mm,
dollars at a plane, you know?
mm.
well something that the chat brought up. Zaraxis in the chat mentioned that one of the things that we don't seem to do is there's not a whole lot of people covering the Flaming Cliffs planes.
Hmm.
And not much content in that way.
That's true. And even
Hmm.
on the instructional side, if you go into DCS itself, for a lot of the FC3 planes now, maybe they've changed it recently. I haven't looked at that particular area in a while, but all you see are those old videos that were, I think, made in Windows XP.
Hmm.
Well, there you go, Crash.
Yeah.
There's a list of new 1 minute DCS videos for you to make.
Unfortunately, this is the catch, and I hate this, and I fought against it for so long, but this is the catch. I know why there is so little content made on the FC3 planes now, and it's really simple. They're not shooting new and shiny, so they don't view.
Yeah.
If you're a content creator on YouTube and you're trying to make content and you're trying to get views and you're trying to grow your channel, you sort of, whether you like it or not, have to go for the new shiny, even
Yeah.
if you're not fond of the new shiny, because the new shiny will get views. It always will, and it sucks that it's that way. And as I said, I've done my best to try and fight that on this end. I would like everything to get good views, regardless of whether it's new or old. But that's just not the way it works. More people are searching for the new release, so which is why you'll tend to find, the F14 came out and everybody or F18 came out, everybody changed to the F18. F14 came out, everybody changed to the F14. I tried to do a few more videos in the F18 because I like it. It's a plane that meshes really well with my issues with my eyes, with the amount of information it feeds
Yeah.
me. And I noticed all my F18 videos basically bottomed out in views because everybody wanted the F14. And so we're now into the F16, and the F16 will get all the views, the F14 will get less, and the next plane, and the next plane, and this will keep happening. And it's unfortunately, that's part of the beast, and it's something that I suppose you've got to try and balance out a bit. I mean, the one at the moment, once I can get the goddamn mission fixed, so I can actually have the triggers operate correctly. The new Huey campaign. Well, it's not new now, but the Huey campaign that I started up a little while ago. I love flying the Huey. I could fly the Huey all day for
You
for
you can
for
keep your
YouTube. Not
whirly
a problem at
bird
all.
of fucking death to yourself.
Dead Meat hates helicopters. He fucking loathes helicopters. But anyways, I could fly that thing all day long. Nobody watches those videos. If I get 4,000 or 5,000 views on a Huey video, it's a pretty good video.
That's
Nobody.
not entirely true. I watch those videos.
It's
It's
six
So
or
do
seven
I.
years
I
old.
just sit there and watch, hoping you crash and die, so I have some masturbation material.
Yeah, but that's different. That's for all of my videos. Whenever I fly, that I crash, so you can jack one out.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
But yeah, because it's such an old machine, you tend to get less views on it, and that's a fairly iconic aircraft as well. But that tends to happen. So this, yeah, it kind of sucks. It really does. But it's part of that is um it's just the nature of the beast in terms of advertising, unfortunately.
I think also with YouTube, there you can some of the older stuff you can actually make videos on it, and as you said, you'll get
Mm,
fuck all views on it. But
mm,
over time, they do increase
mm,
because it's kind of what I call a vault as such,
mm,
where people, there's always going to be somebody who buys, a Huey in a sale, and they're like, "Oh my god, what am I going to do with this thing?"
mm.
And I think it feeds into that, but it's a very slow trickle. It's not,
Yeah.
otherwise you're kind of chasing the next latest and greatest thing. And
Mm,
I think after a while that actually it can burn people out.
mm. Oh, it absolutely can, and we saw some of that
Yeah.
with the F-14, which was really interesting because we were all the content creators who got access to the F-14 were doing our best to moderate our releases and separate them out,
Yeah.
trying not to flood. Like we were really reining back and trying to limit ourselves on the amount that we were releasing, and yet you still saw people just burning out on F-14 combat content as it was coming through.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's unfortunately the problem with new and shiny as well. If too much of it is as bad as not enough of it, and um, it's a hard thing to balance. You are right about having the backlog though, and long term, the videos will always pick up the views. I mean, I'm sitting on over 1,000 videos at this point, and I still get views on videos that I cannot work out for the life of me why people are still watching. Actually, one today, a War Thunder video. I was going through my analytics for this month. For some reason, this month, a War Thunder video that I made 4.5 years ago showed up in my top 5 viewed videos for the channel for this month. I have no idea why. I've barely played War Thunder in 6 months. I think I've released 5 videos on War Thunder in the last year, and yet just out of the blue, this random video just suddenly drew a lot of attention for no apparent reason. Fuck knows why, but it did. So long term, those videos that are archived away do pick up the views, but when you're looking at from a content creation standpoint, it can be sometimes hard to remember that, especially when you're looking at the new shiny and knowing that yeah, drop a video on this and you're probably going to pick up 20K
Yeah.
instantly, 30, 40, 50. And yeah, I've been consciously trying to avoid that. Like you'll notice at the moment, I've done 2 videos on the F-16. I did one of me doing a bit of bombing practice with dead meat. I did one that was my first impressions of it, which were less than good, although it's been fixed up now, as we discussed last time. They've corrected a few things. Hopefully we will never see that again because that kind of sucked. But I'm trying not to flush my channel with F-16 stuff at the moment because I don't want to see that same burnout like I did with the F-14 and with the F-18. But yeah, that's
I see.
yeah.
I think that's the big problem when, particularly if you remember release date of the F-18,
Mm,
all you had were people literally flying off the decks of carriers and into the sea, for days. And I think what happens is you can only watch, so many videos of that, and then everybody gets lost. It's like a crowd screaming. Every single voice
mm,
gets completely lost in the din.
mm,
And I think Eagle Dynamics have been slightly. I don't know. Now, this is just a theory I have, a very unresearched one, that Eagle Dynamics have been kind of stepping away from that
mm,
themselves with the last release or the last
mm.
couple of releases. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But I think they're kind of starting to take control of their message.
Yeah, and that's not a horrible thing by any way, shape, or form. Although if they're gonna do that, they've really got to get their releases sharp. Like that's the one thing
Yeah,
that's popped up, and I'll be clear here. I don't think this is correct. I think Eagle Dynamics is actually probably being on the up and up here. they've said that they didn't give creators access to the F-16 early because they're basically working on it up until the last minute, and they never had time to actually build a sort of a demo early access build.
That's
And
right.
I think they were genuine on it. The
Oh
problem is
yes,
when the aircraft
absolutely.
the problem is when the aircraft came out, missing the damage model and having a whole bunch of other assorted issues to it, what it appears to those on the outside who haven't dealt with Eagle Dynamics and know this kind of stuff, or at least are sort of used to this kind of stuff and how things work behind the scenes and understand how the development side works behind the scenes, that appears like Eagle Dynamics did not give the creators access to the aircraft because they knew they were going to get blasted because this is the release date of the aircraft. So imagine what it would have been like if they got an early access build that wasn't even that polished, and that was what they had to work with on it. A positive can be how something that is completely unintended to be negative can very quickly become a negative because the community now has an expectation that this is going to be a thing. A new plane's going to come out,
Yep.
and they're going to have their X list of content creators that they like, and there can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, however many, that are going to get access to the plane ahead of time, and they're going to get feedback not from the company, from those people. And so
Yeah,
when something like this happens, like if they want to take control of the message, that's cool. And actually, I encourage that, and they really should be pushing the message more. Eagle Dynamics should be advertising the shit out of DCS, trying to get impressions in front of as many people as they possibly can. But if you're going to do it, you've got to make sure you've got your releases sharp because it can bite you really badly if it get it wrong.
absolutely.
Mm,
I think um, I was slightly more positive about the
mm,
F-16, but just for the simple reason that a for in my I tend to do this in my first look videos. I tend to treat the
mm,
aircraft like an egg, so
mm,
I didn't crash it. Didn't even realize the damage model wasn't there. But the other thing, the only thing that kind of irked me a little bit was the what's it called, the INS system being missing
mm,
because I'm very much a systems guy. So that was the only thing. But I didn't really. I was expecting it to be a work in progress.
mm,
Because I remember when the F-18 launched, there wasn't an IFF system, and
mm,
people were flying around servers shouting Marco Polo at each other. So I was expecting some missing things, but I think the only thing I feel is that I think they may now. I'm with you. I don't believe in any of the conspiracy theories floating
mm,
around. I think they were actually working their arses off to the last minute. In fact, if I was to come up with my own little conspiracy theory, I would say that everything was going swimmingly until a few days before release, and something may have went wrong somewhere, and they were in a world of shit trying to sort that out. That's just what it seems like to me. But
mm,
I th- I think if they I think they should have advertised it coming up to the release.
mm,
And that's where, because remember the F-18 release, it was everywhere. It was something big is coming to DCS.
mm,
And the same with the F-14. And even without the exterior content creation, there was that sense of something really big is coming to. Now, maybe it was time of year, because I always think that launching aircraft, possibly in, there are certain types of times of year that things will sell well. And I think sometimes the end of summer and coming into early autumn, people kind of tend, I'm sure you see it from your YouTube metrics, people kind of tend to tune out. And it also obviously depends on
mm,
sorry, I was just about to become how would you say, a hemisphere chauvinist there. But I'm talking about the northern hemisphere winter. I notice
yeah.
people views just drop off completely. and
Mm.
then they start picking up again, coming up particularly November, December, January, February, up to about May, early June, and then it drops off a cliff again. And I sometimes think the time you release something also kind of feeds into whether it sells well or not.
Yeah, very much so. There's a reason why, if you follow the YouTube analytics very well, and you look at the advertisers and how much they actually pay for ads, the 2 months before November tend to be slightly below average, but not great. November and December are the two highest CPM months of the year, without question. Now we're inside of November. Now, if you have content creators that you watch, including myself, because I'm going to be trying to do this as well, because we all have to, they'll be trying to release 2 videos a day if they can get away with it. They
Yeah.
will be trying to release videos that are going to be maximizing on views. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow my regular schedule. I'm just going to try and release more than normal as much as I can. They will be doing everything possible to get as many videos out as they possibly can, because the jump in November, December is worth more. November is twice the standard. December is nearly 3 times the standard value of ads. And then you hit January. January is the month where you should almost send a thank you to your content creators that you like for making you content, because we essentially all work for free.
Yeah.
The drop on January is so severe in terms of eCPMs that there is a reason why those that have the ability to go on holidays in January. There's virtually no point in it. Basically, I have to make January and part of February's money on my end, because I'm obviously, because of the disability and the rest, I use YouTube to make my money to pay my bills. I don't have a
Yeah.
choice in the matter for the moment. I have to make all of January. I have to make November, December, all of January's and part of February's in November and December. If I don't, I will actually run out of money and have to make a rain check on my bills in the first 2 months of the following year.
Yeah.
Like it's that severe a thing.
Yeah.
And
As
there's a
that
reason why advertise.
wait, which is a perfect segue to point out the official MagzTV merch store, and your
Thank you for
Patreon,
that.
and your
And my
subscribe stuff.
subscribe stuff.
So
Yes, if anyone
just
would like
keep
to
in
help
mind,
support me.
if you want to keep this guy talking and not passing out from lack of food or electricity or air conditioning,
I'll stop my wife stabbing me to death.
yeah,
That's probably a major thing as well.
yeah. Go buy his shit, give him money so we can keep making the stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no, he doesn't need the coffee.
I'll put an extra thing on there as well too. Like Subscribestar and Patreon is fantastic, but if I had to give you an option on which one to get, have a look at the merch store and have a look at a shirt. I really like the fact that I'm doing designs on this end, and you guys are buying them and actually wearing them. There's something about knowing that a physical item that I have designed is in your hands. Even if I don't make a particularly large amount on it, I prefer that one. I get stoked on this end when somebody on my Discord posts a photo of them wearing one of my shirts or drinking a coffee from one of my coffee mugs.
That reminds me,
It's something not digital.
Yeah, I've still got to pick up that Halloween night, which is one, and then I'll send you a picture of me wearing that, and only that.
Yes. Oh God, no, don't do that. Don't, no. But it's just something about, I've spent the last 6 years making stuff that is completely digital, completely virtual, and actually seeing somebody holding something that I designed on their end and enjoying it that is physical. It blows the shit out of anything I could do on the digital side.
Speaking of which, Crash, do you have anything I can sort of shill for you?
No, I've actually I haven't started shilling yet. For some reason they won't let me traffic drugs or whores, so I'm at a bit of a loss.
Oh, that sucks.
It does. I mean,
Goddamn
you
loss.
could buy your own, Laobi midget whore, who could be yours for 100 days if only they would allow me link the websites.
Well, we did mention weave shit earlier on, so you could go for a Laobi body pillow, just entry point, and go from there.
That's true, but I would rather separate it just from me by 1 degree. I can just imagine these strange people who play flight sims, poking holes and filling them with meat and things, and Doesn't bear thinking about.
All right. Oh shit!
I'll send you a
Sorry.
selfie so you can picture me as I cuddle a bootleg body pillow of you, Crash.
This is not
Thank you
getting
very
better.
much.
This is not getting better.
Anyway,
Um,
that'll finish shilling. Back to the topic at hand.
back to what I was saying. There's a reason why advertisers pay in there, and it's not just the Christmas thing. They also have analytics on when people tend to pick up stuff, when people tend to tune out stuff, what tends to um, generate sales. I used to work in advertising back when I had decent eyes and could actually do the travel, and you'd be amazed at the internal analytics and the internal projections that some advertising agencies are actually able to put together. They know when something is they know is going to happen, that is coming up, is going to trigger sales in particular markets, and exactly where to put their advertising money to make it. After all the years of doing it, they've become very, very, very good at it. And you can sort of map out how they run their projections based on where they're placing their money and by how much they're placing their money. Like, I can tell you right now, they're expecting November and December this year to be a very big year because they're throwing some big dollars. But from what I've seen so far, there's also a very high probability that they're going to pull virtually all their advertising money out of YouTube for awareness advertising, because that's what YouTube's advertising is, as of January. So they're expecting a massive crash after Christmas, New Year's.
Yeah.
So from what I've seen on the projections so far and the stuff that's out there, like, they're very good at this, and it would probably pay for companies like Eagle Dynamics and other flight sim developers as well to pay attention to these, because these marketing guys, they know their stuff, and you don't have to pay them to get access to the information. You've just got to be watching the markets and seeing what they're doing, and work your sales from there, and you can sort of optimize things a little.
Yeah.
But moving on to other hardware stuff, and actually, this is something I wanted to mention before with hardware and linking up to flight sims. I'm sort of jumping back a little bit in the podcast here as well, and I mentioned this last time as well. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I think this is possibly one of the best moves any flight sim developer has done, and I am fucking amazingly happy that Microsoft's actually going to try and pull it off. Putting 2020 on an Xbox. That is going to put flight sim in front of a huge market that has never been addressed before.
I'm looking forward to that.
Definitely a good idea.
Mm. Mm.
I'm slightly concerned about 2020 in that, more from the hardcore simmers side of things. The thing that concerns me is I think people are expecting it to be, their Lord and Savior, and it may not, have all the things they wish it has when it launches. And I think also that if you remember back to the launch of actually FSX, do you remember that old meme? That's a great PC, but kind of play Crisis. That was kind of
Yes.
the position we were in with it when FSX launched.
What was
It
that?
was beautiful at the time, but there was nothing could play it. And I just hope that they kind of focus on getting it running across as many systems as possible.
Well, there
But
has
then
been a
again,
little bit of
yeah.
information on that. So, sorry for cutting you off there.
No,
There's
go
been a
ahead, please.
there has been a little bit of information on that, not directly, but it comes from the a select group of YouTubers that YouTubers and experts, some actual pilots as well, that do some of the content online and have a bit of following from the civil aviation space, were invited to go and actually play it at a press conference and speak to
Yeah.
the developers directly, speak to the guys from Microsoft and all that kind of stuff. Now, the specs for what they were running, they were describing the flight models and everything else on it. Apparently, it is very much a proper sim. It's not
Yeah.
like what was that last release they did?
Flight Sim
Microsoft
World.
Flight, Microsoft Flight, I think was there as well. It
Oh,
was
yes.
basically an arcade. That was terrible. It's not like that. It is a proper, full-on flight sim. They did take a peek through the side of the boxes though to see what's in there, and they did notice that everything was running an RTX 2080 titanium, and everything was a current generation i9. Now that could be just Microsoft just buying
Yeah.
the top equipment because that would be smart, but a top end system is basically it's probably a safe assumption you're going to need something on the high if you want to run everything at maximum
Yeah.
anyway. What was interesting though was what they noted on it wasn't direct hardware reporting because obviously they didn't have access to that and they wouldn't let them look. But just a couple of notes on how the systems were performing themselves for even a high end. They didn't seem to be pushing those systems despite having that hardware in them all that hard. And that's because of what came out in the Q&A for it is the vast majority of the world rendering is actually going to be rendered off system. It'll come in
Yeah.
instruction wise via the net. So hardware wise, and this is how apparently they're going to be dealing with the console side. How do you get an Xbox to run a photorealistic flight simulator with a fully modeled flight model? Well, you have the
True.
Xbox only deal with the flight model, and you let a
So it's
cloud
basically
computer deal with everything
streaming.
else. Yeah, so it streams the rest of it in, and it can preload sections of it ahead and in advance, and that will be how you get around the problem of trying to process this massive, ultra detailed world.
I,
Yeah.
You take
I
the
also
processing for it completely away from the Xbox.
yeah, I also think you're underestimating the power of the current gen and next gen consoles. Because the current gen, like whatever the 4K capable
Hmm.
current Xbox is, that's running essentially an AMD Ryzen CPU.
Yeah. Well, then, yeah, the new
And
that was the next part. The new Project Scorpio, I think they're calling it,
yeah,
which is essentially supposed to be the Xbox One Plus. I don't think they've officially labeled it as a new console yet, just an improved version of the standard Xbox One. Whether or not that changes or not, it's going to be a whole thing. But yeah, it's got some really wicked hardware specs on it as well.
yep, AMD APU, but they're basically sticking in RX 580
Mm,
GPU and 8-core Ryzen CPU. Um,
mm,
the current gen Ryzen CPU type thing
mm.
on the one chip and pumping it out. Um, According to the chat, it's Project
Project
Scarlet.
Scarlet. Yeah,
Yep.
sorry. I knew it started with S. I don't follow the console side that close, but close enough in this particular area because this interests me. Because basically, the console users are a huge part of gaming, massively huge part
Yeah.
of gaming. Yet, not once in the history of consoles being popular has anybody tried to put a full-on flight simulation on a console. They've never done it. Anybody who has been a dedicated console gamer has never had any exposure to flight simulators whatsoever in any form of any kind. So if they can make this work, there is a whole generation of gamers that just never went into PC gaming. They became gamers in the PlayStation era or after, and
Yeah.
they never did PC at all that are about to find themselves with direct access. And that's one of the things I don't know if they intended to show it or not, or if it was an accident or what it was. But there was a splash screen up because I've got the Microsoft Game Pass for the Microsoft Store. So yeah, pay a couple of bucks and you get access to the entire Flash catalog. Well, I was dicking around in there and I managed to bring up a splash page for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 that had just a couple of screenshots on it and the logo, and that's all it was. But it had down on the bottom of it included in Microsoft Game Pass,
Wow.
which means anybody who's running a Xbox Game Pass on console, if they do continue that through and that wasn't an accident or something that just sort of washed
Yeah.
over, like this was me dicking around and pulling that up.
Yeah.
Everybody who's on Game Pass on Xbox, if they do go that way, will have access to Flight Simulator 2020 by default. They won't have to buy it; they just have it. And everybody on PC will too. So
Yeah.
everybody with a Microsoft account, essentially, who's paying to have access to Microsoft's catalog, regardless of the platform, is going to have Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. They're not going to have to sell it. You just have it. That opens up a massive window of people that would otherwise never have spent money to buy it that may potentially look. I think Microsoft's probably doing the best play for bringing more people into the community than anybody else at this point. Unfortunately, it's not the combat side. I'd love to see it as Microsoft Combat Flight
Yeah.
Simulator that's getting work back in. But any kind of way of pulling people in at this point, and on that particular title, it's going to look like that. Of everybody else,
Absolutely.
I think they're doing the number one. Yeah.
No, I think they are doing a great job. The only thing that concerns me slightly is that, as I say, I'm kind of concerned that if they don't get it right, they could cause more problems or more harm than benefit. Because what tends to happen with a lot of the big companies are they're driven by their marketing team.
Mhm.
And if suddenly the metrics don't look right, you can see that things, everything is subject to change basically, and you can
Yeah.
see things getting pulled. So I'm really stoked for it. I'm hoping it's going to be amazing, but I'm also just the cynical side of me is a little bit wait and see.
Yeah. Well, I do. Obviously, there is always a chance that things are going to go wrong. And speaking of going, we've sort of gone over what can sort of content creators sort of do. What can the community sort of do? What could Eagle Dynamics or other flight sim developers in general do to try and draw people in? What can hardware developers do? The other side, which I know is something you wanted to have a bit of a talk about, and there was a Venn diagram that was up before that was a good example of this.
It is back.
What can we not? What can we not do? Because I think there's a lot of things that we could not do, and I'm going to just sit back here and I'm going to enjoy this one.
I happen to. I've switched it from the Venn diagram to something that you may not know about.
Don't know about what's this
No,
about?
you may have guessed. I'm viewing a certain subreddit.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
And here, and here come
Thrustmaster.
here come all the
Pray
here come all
tell.
the downvotes. Um,
You're-
yes. All right. Flight simming is full of toxic cunts. That a pretty basic intro here?
I think that sums it up pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. How exactly as a community do we sort this problem out? On my side of things, I've mentioned it here a couple of times, and I will continue to have to mention it. And I sort of mention it by almost feels like requirement now. I have a visual disability. My eyes are fucked, so I have to fly fighters using markers. Otherwise, I can't track fighters. I just can't do it. I really have massive issues. Yet almost every time I post a video that has markers in it, I'll have some up their ass fucking elitist cockbag come through and try and blow my torch for fucking having markers in a flight sim, for it cheating, for it not being. And it just these people drive me up the fucking wall, and yet and they know that they know the reasons why. I have to explain it all the goddamn time, and you'll regularly see it's more than one person, or it'll be the same person repeating stuff over and over again.
Yeah, well,
It's just, do people?
no, they don't.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my head up here. They need to look at yourselves. I say look at yourselves. Most of the people that are here aren't, that I imagine, but they need to realize exactly how this looks to the outside. When you've got people that are having shots about markers, that are having shots about not running particular settings, that crack the shits for people not running correct procedures, or not like what's your Venn diagram again? Not counting the bolts on the aircraft correctly and getting the numbers wrong, or
Rivet
fuck knows
counters,
how
yeah.
many other rivet counters. Fucking just they need to realize how much they turn people from the outside off.
That's it. I often think, and it's kind of a pity, when you look at a lot of flight sim communities, it's divided between bellends who basically just want to fuck up somebody else's day and the snooty types. And
Mm.
when I think of flight simmers, are always, have you ever seen that painting, American Gothic? If you haven't looked at it,
Yes.
and it's that immediately when you look at some forums, that's the picture of the people behind those forums.
Mm.
It's two very serious looking people with a fucking pitchfork, and I honestly think it's a symptom also of the wider world, in the sense there are a lot of people around happen to think that I don't like this. I don't like the way you do this. Therefore, you and it should not exist.
Mm.
There's a lot of that going around. And I also think, in general, we've never, particularly in flight simming, never had it so good. I
Mm.
mean, UI and Dead Meat started off basically playing probably filled vector graphics.
I started off
Yep.
in
Pretty close.
essentially Flight Sim 2 before it was owned by Microsoft on an Atari
Wow,
ST.
Sublogic.
Yep.
My first flight sim microposed F-117 Stealth Fighter and
I love that.
F-18. F-18. What was the one that came with the Amiga again? We talked about this one the other day. I can't remember.
Yeah,
There was
I'm
an
happy to go
F-18
into
flight
this
sim.
in real detail.
Yeah. There was an F-18 one that came out with the Amiga 500 anyway.
Yeah, so
Quite, like you said before, a massive fold-out piece of paper across the keyboard with all the instructions
Yes,
on how to fly, and you needed a code wheel in order to get your security code to lock in
that's
as
right.
security
Yeah.
protection. Yeah, I started on those two, and it was fabulous.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. We've never had it better than we are, but we've never had more bricks in the community than ever. I think a big part of it is too. I think a big part of it, and people need to realize this that do it, is it's almost like remember how all the PC crowd used to take the piss out of the console crowd as they were arguing over Xbox better,
PC Master
PlayStation bigger.
Race.
Yeah, PC Master Race. It's almost an extension of that. I fly flight sims, so I am better than you pathetic gamer. Have a look how the DCS community or parts of the DCS community look down on War Thunder. Now, War Thunder, whether you like War Thunder or not, is a whole different thing. Some people do, some people don't. That's perfectly fine. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one, and you're perfectly
Exactly.
valid to have your opinion. That's perfectly fine. But take a look. Just pause for a moment and actually take a look at the War Thunder community, and then the DCS community. Sometimes, particularly around a patch or an aircraft release for DCS, and sort of the similar time for the War Thunder community. Do you realize that the War Thunder community is less toxic?
And that's a
The one
scary thought.
That's a horribly scary thought. I came out of that community. My channel developed because of that community. I went into the DCS community. The DCS community is regularly more toxic than the War Thunder community is. And the War Thunder community can be off the fucking chain sometimes, to the point where I stop using Reddit completely.
Yeah.
And then you go to other games, the general games, step out of flight simulation completely. And everybody, I've mentioned a couple of times here, Fortnite. I don't play Fortnite. I have no real interest in playing Fortnite. Know a lot of people that do play Fortnite though. Take a look at the Fortnite forums sometimes. For a game that's got that many people in there, and for all the shit that pops up around it, sometimes it is positively fucking friendly in there.
Yeah.
If you go and look at their Reddit, these people, in the end, the most elite gamer on DCS, the best DCS simulation pilot in the world, who knows every single procedure perfectly and can pull everything off perfectly fine, is a dickhead sitting in a computer behind a keyboard with a mouse to his right, generally with some kind of controller to play the game. The guy playing Fortnite is a dickhead sitting behind a keyboard with a mouse to his right with some kind of controller behind a monitor playing a game.
Exactly.
The same fucking thing, peoples, but you tend to find, for some reason, and it could be the fact that this community is just so niche, and maybe adding more people to it will actually solve the problem, but you tend to get this group that is extremely elitist and looks down on everything around them and everyone around them, and they don't really, I know they're fully a minority. They are a minority group, but they have the loudest voices and they tend to get the most notice. And whenever you're trying to get new people in, they tend to be the first that are picked up on. And I do know of people in my own community that have been interested in jumping into flight simming, that have jumped onto before coming to my Discord server and sort of meeting the rest of the crowd and finding another way in, that went over and jumped over onto Hoggit, jumped into a couple of lines of the threads, took one look at the community and went, fuck this shit, and fucked off. Went back to War Thunder.
That's like, that is, unfortunately, if you look at Hoggit on certain days, you would get
Mm,
the impression that a number of people have invested in some sort of Ponzi scheme and are searching for justice. You know, you wouldn't know sometimes that it's actually a flight sim community, and it's
mm,
populated by people who actually love the game.
mm.
And it's such a pity in some ways. I mean, criticism is necessary,
Yes.
but at some points when you've got people basically telling you, "Oh, I've been scammed," or "Oh, this is an absolute heap of shit," it's like, well, why why are you here? And secondly, why do you continue to be here and continue to invest money in it if
Mm,
you feel it's such a shit show? Uh, I think there are people that they want to be unique and special, and their only way of being unique and special is to tell the rest of the world what they hate, and in the
mm,
process, basically demonstrate what a cunt they are to the rest of the world in most cases. Now,
mm,
maybe I've got the wrong take on it, but I see a lot of stuff that you only really see in political arenas. It's almost borderline hatred. You know, somebody makes a reasonable point, and there are 10 other people literally queuing up, taking their pants down to rape them for it. You know,
mm.
it's just uh, I don't know what the cure. I think more people is definitely the cure. But as I even said before the podcast, I think it, attracting, you know, people of all kinds, and particularly attracting some women into it,
Mm.
because I think when you put groups of men together and leave them there for long enough, there is something strange that happens. And for example, like near where I live, there's an airbase, and there's a guy who lives right opposite that airbase, and he marches up and down every day, beating a drum, holding a little sign complaining about how the military are bullying him because he lives near the airbase and he has to put up with noise from the aircraft. Now, I don't know anything else about that guy, but I can tell you one thing 100% certain. He hasn't got a wife. Because if he had a wife, I mean, if Mrs. Laobi came home and found me standing outside, marching up and down with a drum, beating it, complaining about being bullied by the military, I'd wake up in the nearest casualty department with 4 proctologists standing around me, wondering how they're going to get a snare drum out of my arse. And so that's really just to illustrate the point that I think uh, we need a lot more people, but I think also women tend to look at the stupid when men start becoming really special and get too far into something. A woman will generally look at you and say, "What the fuck are you at? What are you doing here?" And or why are you getting so upset about this? So I think virginity might be a big part of the problem. Like,
Yeah,
but
I will
sorry,
admit I've had a couple of no, no, no. You're completely right. I've had a couple of moments where I've come out and I have been unreasonably angry about something that has happened, and I my wife for this. I absolutely love my wife for this. I've come out and I've been unreasonably angry about something that's happened. I've walked out and she can see that I'm pissed. What's wrong? And so I explain it to her, and she just looks at me like I'm a fucking idiot.
yeah.
She just stares at me like, "That's it." That's she wants to fucking belt me over the head with a fry pan just to fucking knock some sense into me, and just the look tends to be enough to actually do that. And I was, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm being a fucking idiot. Okay, suck it in, sort it out. Yes, no, I agree. Yeah, I have wondered in the past what would some of these people, because yeah, some of them like you would like to assume that they're kids or their thing, but for some of them I've seen they would have to be my age or more.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd have to be people that. What would happen if their wives or girlfriends actually saw the shit that they say online? Really, really,
Yeah, I
what
think you
what
mean what would happen if their imaginary wives or girlfriends saw the shit they say online.
that's possible. But also on the more serious note, I've looked at some of them, and and some of the comments and some of what has been said and tends to pop up. How many people in the combat flight sim community are here because they love planes and they love combat flight simming, and how many are here just for the ego note of being in this small elite community that is supposedly better than everything else that's around it? And because I have seen the concept of doing things, actually a perfect example of it was DCS a little while ago, and as far as I know, I don't know what's happened with it. It could have been put on the shit show for this point. You'll remember they did the announcement for Modern Air Combat, which is supposed to be the replacement for Flaming Cliffs 3, and it was going to have all the Flaming Cliff stuff in it, rejigged for a new release, as well as having basically some FC3 versions of some of the fully clickable, fully interactive aircraft, and some sections of some of the pay for maps to run those missions on, as a way of trying to generate something to bring new people into the community. Do you remember the backlash that some people seem to drop on that? That seemed to be only because bringing new people would dumb down the game somehow. That
That
potentially having a larger target audience to sell products to was a negative because it was going to make DCS's community more stupid. Like, I remember that, and
I remember that big time, and it still goes on. There are still little conspiracy theories out now. We're talking about people who believe vaccinations cause AIDS or autism or whatever,
Mm,
but
mm,
there are still little conspiracy sewing circles out there
mm.
who believe that the reason the F-16 wasn't up to their standard was because some of the people were working on Mac, you know, and
Yeah,
so that's still going on. And the whole thing is you can educate dumb people, but
Yeah, I'm a good
morons
example.
who morons who just want to hate the world, you can do fuck all about them except avoid them.
Well, you could
mm.
pay for a hooker for them.
They're going to complain about the hooker, she wasn't shaved, or her dick was too big, or whatever. They're going to find something.
Yeah,
And
Cutlass has just said, I found in DCS that there are so many people willing to share info and help you learn. There are a big thing. As I said, the negative group in here is a minority, but it does tend to pop up and it does tend to be particularly loud. And anytime there is any kind of controversy, you can see it kind of flare up. It's like a rash, it's an
Yeah.
infection that keeps popping up in the community. And it is something that needs to be dealt with. For the most part, most of the community is good, and most of the community is friendly. I've on my end, basically the entirety. Well, it's the Unprofessionals podcast. The whole thing of the Unprofessionals came into existence and the entirety of my channel, for that matter, came into existence with the idea of trying to help new people. I don't make content outside of people having a good laugh at me fucking up, which is perfectly fine, and anyone is more than welcome to do that. And I don't try and
I
hide my
do.
fuck ups. People do it, yes, and people do. But the majority of what I make is tended to be aimed at new people. How cool is this? How awesome is this? You should try this. You should have a look at this. You should try and play this. Look at different parts of the game, make a mission, fly it out, do something cool, make people want to join. My entire Discord channel, bring people in that may not be experienced in the game. We have a couple of servers that Dead Meat runs, devoted to one to IL2, one to DCS, that is set up for new people to jump into. And we encourage people that have no DCS experience whatsoever to jump on. And if you crash at the end of the runway, that's perfectly fine. We'll tell you what you did wrong. We'll have a chat about it. We'll sort you out. We'll get you going on a mission and
And
try
while,
and attract new people in and help them
and while we're
and
doing
have a
that, I'll take off on the other runway. Um,
yeah, and we'll and also watch the experienced people, because despite what some people will let you to believe, it doesn't matter how experienced you are at any flight sim, how good you think you are. Occasionally, you do just fuck up. It
Oh
just does
yes.
happen, and it does happen more regularly than some would like to let on. And again, we don't try and cover that up. It's all good fun.
I've,
So
I've,
there is a lot of good inlets into the community, but
I've.
all you've got to do is land at the wrong time in the wrong spot.
Speaking of that,
Yes.
I'd just like to point
Yeah.
out. I'd just like to point out that I've been flying flight sims for 30 years now. I have done actually flight lessons. I was until I got poor. Was actually going for my general aviation pilot's license at one stage. Um, that was expensive. But you look at Max's last F-16 video, my perfect landing in the M2000.
Boing, 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 boing. Yeah, well, I've been flying flight sims for as long as Deadmeat has, and you guys get to watch me fuck up a landing virtually every time I post an IL-2 or DCS video. It's yeah, it's
But
the
it's
good
not
parts.
even.
Go.
Sorry, go ahead. It's
No,
not
you
even
go.
people who, I'm sure you get them on your channel as well. There are
Mm,
some great people out there with a hell of a lot of knowledge,
mm,
and they will post a message. They say, "Hey, you fucked up there. Here's what you did wrong, or here's what you said wrong, and here's how it should be." And those people are brilliant. It's
mm,
the people who just want to shit on everything. And you were saying earlier, but the same about the labels. People getting pissy because labels appear. Now, I think it works fairly well. I have a good anti because I really don't give a fuck. So I have a fairly good antidote for people who just want to come on and bitch, which is a little message, which is, "Oh, thank you very much for. Glad you enjoy it." I always emphasize that. Glad you enjoyed the video. There's some guy on going, "That was fucking shit," and you're like, "Glad you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much," and it just completely disarms them.
This is a good point. I should probably need to take up more of that. Yeah, I've gotten short of it over the. Well, actually, no, I've gotten better of it. I used to be really, really, really short of it on my end in this particular area. I have very much. I've almost taken up my own version of the OK Boomer meme at this point. Just I'm beyond caring about them for the most
Yeah,
part. Having said that, I still every time I do a video where I've got the markers on, I have to do a small piss spiel where I explain why. And I just feel like I
yeah,
have to at this point, and it shits me to tears that I feel like I have to, but I have to, and this is where it's come from. It's
yeah,
it's basically been driven into me by these basically fuckbags that come in and just give you shit constantly for doing something. And like in my end, it's I have a disability. Like that's hilarious to
yeah,
it. And that also the bit that also goes and going back into thing that it turns on, I know for a fact that I have a lot of people that watch my content that are in their 50s and 60s. I have a
yeah,
really odd analytics for YouTube. My biggest, most from almost virtually every channel on YouTube that has any number of viewers, the biggest analytical area is late teens, early 20s, virtually across
yeah,
the board. Mine is 38 plus. And my analytics for most channels don't go out beyond about 40 to 50. My analytics go out to 70. I have very much seniors that watch my videos. I think part of the reason why they watch my videos is because I actually do run markers so they can actually see what's going on in them.
yeah,
Um, and these are people that are interested in flying as well. Some may be former pilots. Some may be people that have just loved planes their entire life and are looking to get into flight simming or have been part of flight simming at some point in the past and are looking to get back in. And they're interested. And then they see people complaining about that. Like they're people that are going to at their age probably have some visual issues of their own just by default age, and people are complaining about using markers. Like, it's how much do you think that's turning people off? Just seeing that kind of a complaint as somebody when you're sitting on the side of it's not something you can do about it. Your
yeah,
vision's fucked. Like, what else can you do? There's nothing else you can do. When you start seeing that kind of shit, it really like that's why it used to hurt a lot. There's very few things that I give a shit about, but it was one of my areas of weak. It took me quite a few years before I actually really talked about my disability all that much
yeah.
because it's a massive vulnerability point.
And
And then
plus,
there are
it's
other
none of
people.
anybody's business.
Yeah, but like,
You know.
occasionally you've sort of got to bring it up
Yeah,
and sort of explain this is why I have to do things the way that I do. I actually mentioned in a video that I'll be uploading as soon as this podcast is done, why I tend to, whenever I'm flying formation with somebody, I'll tend to form up on the right-hand side of them. Oh, sorry, on the left-hand side of them.
Yeah.
It's because I'm blind in my left eye, so I have no peripheral vision on the left-hand side. I fly on the right-hand side so I can see them. If I'm on the left,
Yeah.
I can't. It's why I tend to turn my head to the right when I'm doing a shoulder check rather than to the left. I will turn to the left, but my dominant first reaction if I'm going to check my tail is look right because it
Yeah.
brings my peripheral vision around to the point where I can actually see where it doesn't on my left. I have to fully turn around to actually be able to see out the left. But there are other
Yeah.
people that have visual issues and then they see people complaining about markers and see people and any other thing too. I'm at the moment I'm testing the twist functionality on this new WinWing stick fairly
Yeah.
heavily because the fact that it's available is a good thing. But if I mention that in a video, there'll be people complaining, "Oh, you should be using rudder pedals. I know you got them." Da, 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 da." Completely missing the fact that the reason why I'm testing them is there's some key people out there that can't use rudder pedals. They don't have function of their legs.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one that is one of the main people over at DCS.
That's
Matt,
right.
Matt's in a wheelchair. He can't use rudder pedals. Twist functionality or and some kind of alternate in order to be able to control rudder is a requirement for him. So,
Yeah.
you're bagging people out for shit that's beyond their control. Like shit gets bagged out for stuff that's beyond their control, and it's very easy for those that have never had a problem. I never considered the effect that like anything like this at all before my eyes started to fail. When
Yeah.
my vision was perfect and everything was fine, I never questioned it. I never even thought of, basic functionality of items that I used every day to somebody who couldn't see properly or potentially couldn't walk or had, whatever, maybe only had functioning one arm, you know,
Mhm.
whatever. It's never something that occurred to me at all until I reached the point where I actually had something that was failing and I had to start looking at it that way. And then you start thinking about everything in that way.
Yeah.
What works, what doesn't, how would somebody approach this, how would somebody approach that based on what they're at. And it gives you a really interesting point. And there are some things that don't make sense from a design standpoint that suddenly make a lot of sense because you can clearly see somebody did think about this.
Yeah. And additionally, like having a twist grip,
Hmm.
there are people that will have financial disabilities where they
Hmm.
can afford to buy one stick. So a Warthog, if they want to fly World War II aircraft, a Warthog isn't going to be particularly useful to them because they need that twist.
There's actually a lot of complaints if you go through the flight sim forums, going back to Star
Yeah.
Citizen, and that aren't from people that have any issues in regards to that or from the financial side. That well, it is sort of financial, I suppose, if you look at it that way. But regardless, that really like the look of the Warthog and have outrightly said that they won't bother buying one because they use the twist functionality for 6 degrees motion inside of a flight simulator, and because the Warthog does not have twist ability, it doesn't matter how good the stick is,
Yeah.
they will not buy it because it lacks a basic functionality that they need from a gameplay standpoint. So they buy other stuff.
Yeah.
There is a reason why, if you go over to the Virpal store right now, they have a whole series of sticks that have twist functionality integrated into the stick by default. Those weren't made by accident. They were made specifically because people wanted or needed that functionality in space sims and because they wanted that functionality available for those who didn't have access to rudder pedals. So you can order in a twist function for rudder control without needing rudders. Yeah, but I'm losing track here of where we're actually up to.
Yeah,
To be honest, but
and we'll probably have to start winding it up shortly because we're
yeah.
up over an hour and a half now.
Wow.
Yeah,
That flew.
Oh,
it did. I sort of
hmm.
looked at the time just and I'm like, oh, because the idea is to try keep this down to about an hour to an hour and a half just to keep it digestible. But
Yeah.
this one, oh,
It's been a lot of fun, but like in long term, this is something it does need to be addressed on that side. I think it just I've said it to people on my Discord before, and sometimes I have to say it to myself because I do occasionally, regularly fuck it up myself too, and it's part of the reason why me and Dead Meat team up so well here because he'll regularly call me a fucking idiot for it when I actually do it as well. Um, Sometimes before you hit the enter key, you just have to pause and consider, and it's not about it's not about fucking offense or safe space bullshit or
No.
anything else, but just consider the basics of your situation versus somebody else's. There's a reason why markers are even an option in DCS. There's a
Yeah.
reason why Eagle Dynamics made sure they're available and why they have updated them and why they've put those in. There's a reason why there's a game mode in DCS. There's
Yeah.
a whole thing ages ago, thread, it was from a couple of years ago actually, where somebody was trying to fly DCS in game mode and they were trying to get what was the question they asked? Ah, that's right. They were trying to get an answer on how they could do a screenshot in DCS game mode while flying without having the overlay on the screen that you get when you're flying in game mode. Because for many DCS pilots have never actually clicked those buttons before. Go in and turn on game avionic mode and game avionics mode and game flight mode, and go and play DCS and have a look at how different it is. It basically turns it into Ace Combat. You can even go through and
Wow.
select unlimited ammunition options. It turns into an arcade game, and it can be
Yeah.
fun to just do stupid shit in every now and again. But whenever you try and screenshot, even turning off, like trying to turn off UI or anything else, you can't. The UI overlay will remain on screen at all times. You can't get rid of it. So he was just trying to ask a simple question of, is there a way that I can make this UI disappear so I can take a cool screenshot of my F-15 in a bank, firing a missile, like everybody wants to take. And I
Yeah.
think it wound up at 62 pages, of which about 50 plus of them were people calling this guy a dickhead and telling him to turn off game mode and turn off and play the game properly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm willing to bet he quit.
Yeah. And
And
that's the whole problem. It's
mm,
nobody seems to want to let anybody else be themselves.
mm, yeah, where it should be very much a case of, it shouldn't matter to anybody in the
Yeah.
DCS community how anybody else is playing, so
Yeah.
long as they're playing. The community's too small
That's
for
it.
us to be picky. Get as many people in here as we can. Drag them in if we have to. Advertise them to people.
Yeah.
Try
If
and
it's
next time you got
not,
mates, if you got mates around at your house, for a beer, oh, come in here and check this out. Load up, whatever module you've got,
yeah.
and just go smash it into the ground or just blow shit up. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
That's why on my servers I
Mm,
try and make sure that I'm a little bit slow sometimes in updating missions, but that's
mm,
that's a whole different subject. But I try and make sure that every plane, every vehicle is available on every mission.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
flying combat missions in the Christian Eagle. Yeah.
That can be fun.
I
But
have
if
done
it's
so.
not a competitive server, then there is no need for, if you're just playing at home for your own entertainment,
Mm,
who cares what way you play? If
mm.
I spoke to a guy who had a disability where he used to play with his feet on a controller.
Yeah, I've seen that before. Actually, I saw
Yeah.
a while back Microsoft. Again, Microsoft's actually been doing a lot of stuff this way. They're doing a lot of stuff in this regard, although apparently it didn't quite work out quite the way they were hoping. But they were developing a controller for that,
Yeah.
so that people with disabilities that couldn't use, it was a configurable controller. People that couldn't use an arm or couldn't use anything but their feet or couldn't use, basically what's had some list, combination of disabilities that prevented them from being able to use a standard controller. They could map controls to something else in order to make up for it with whatever they could do. I think there was one version of it that I thought was really cool for, you want to have an argument with a friend or a sibling. Was basically an Xbox controller, and it was cut in half. And the idea was, if somebody only had control of
Yeah.
one hand,
So that
they would have one half of the controller, and the other half would be on the person sitting next to them, and they would both have to try and play the same game at the same time.
that was
Wow.
actually Ben Heck or Ben Heckendorf.
Yep.
Um, on what used to be the Ben Heck show. He was well known for making those kinds of controllers for disabled
Mm.
people.
Yeah, I know there was somebody who did it beforehand. That was probably him. And
Yep.
then I think Microsoft tried to buy the rights and actually develop a proper one for it. Regardless, it was, if somebody tried to make one, and I thought that was fucking great. More of that. Um, yeah, just needs to be something that happens more in the community here, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, and my brain is
That's
starting to fry. Apologies for starting to get pretty scattered here at the end, guys.
it's
This has been
absolutely fine.
a little bit on my own personal side as well, and a little bit of an apology to everybody watching who has been wondering where the fuck have the videos been for the last couple of days, Mags. I had a car accident a couple of weeks back. Some of you know that, some of you don't. But yeah, basically that didn't do wonders. Had a few other things going on there as well in regards to finals that I was trying to fit around in that for the graphic design. And then I just had a water pipe explode on the side of my house that is going to involve me having to spend probably the next couple of days ripping out my entire kitchen. So um, this last 30 days has been fucking wonderful. Shoot me now, please. Um, so that's about where my head is at the moment. On my end, and I'll do my outro out first because I believe Laobi has a particular outro that I would like him to run.
Yeah,
One, so I'll
and
do mine out first.
that particular one has actually been requested by the chat as well.
Yes, it has been. I did notice that.
Brilliant.
I am going to. I will be having the start of an IL2 campaign mode now that 4001 has released on IL2, which will be uploading as soon as this stream finishes. Hopefully, it'll be up in the next couple of hours. Flying the P38. I'll also have obviously my continuation of Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I'll be trying to get some more Outer Worlds on the channel as well. I did see mentioned before more Cold Waters. Yes, more Cold Waters is coming. I'm actually contemplating starting up a new campaign on that one in the modern era, just so I can wash off some of those Mark 37 or Mark 38 torpedoes from me, because God, those things are shit. Something with give me some 48 ab caps, please. I need them at this point. And I am, and I've mentioned it a couple of times on my own personal streams, on the quiet ones. I am actually working on something involving Silent Hunter again as well, because I've been getting my naval itch on. No
Now,
KSP. No, KSP's on there as well. And needs more Star Citizen. Yes, Sir Axis. I was actually updating that today, and that's part of my tomorrow thing. I'm just not sure where to start covering first. But anyways,
now,
I do have stuff coming on that end.
yep, just on my end. Once this podcast is finished, I'm going to be exporting it to audio only, so it will be up available on all the major podcast platforms. The first 2 episodes of the podcast are already available. So if you search for the Unprofessionals podcast, you should be able to find us with the logo you see on the screen there. It should be fairly easy to find. And then I'll be passing the recorded files through to Mags to upload to his YouTube channel as well. So if you missed the start of the stream, you can listen back to it at your leisure.
All right, Laobi, shill your shit and sign us off.
Okie dokie. On my end, basically, I'm actually working on finishing a review of or really a first look of the new Blackhawk controller, which I'm actually really enjoying now. Basically, toying around with getting into a little bit of IL2 because I've been playing it for years and haven't bothered my arse making a video on it yet. Obviously, I'll be continuing the usual tutorial series with TCS. And yeah, that's basically. Additionally, right after this podcast, I'll be going to take a look at the various forums and having a laugh at people calling me a cunt. But yeah, apart from that, I'll go straight to the outro. So we thank you all very much for watching. Please don't forget to dislike or tell us all to go fuck ourselves below.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.